Good morning and welcome to the Growth and Thriving Morning Mindset. I'm your host, Dr. Jerry Sunshine Novak, the Biker Psychologist. And lately, I've been thinking about self-compassion. It's interesting to me. It's very curious to me that of all the tools and techniques by which people learn to thrive and by which people pursue personal growth, self-compassion is the one that elicits the most resistance, the most pushback from people. People will flat out say to me that they don't want to practice self-compassion. They're afraid that if they practice self-compassion, they will lose their edge, they won't stay sharp. All sorts of things about why they justify not wanting to treat themselves with kindness. So let's take a few minutes and let's talk about what self-compassion is and what self-compassion is not. So let's start with what it's not. Self-compassion is not complacency, right? Self-compassion does not mean that I look at my failings and my shortcomings and I say, there, that's okay. Those shortcomings are fine. That's not self-compassion. That's enabling. That's complacency, and it's different, okay? Self-compassion is not acceptance of, it is acceptance of shortcomings and limitations, but not in a way that is a permanent acceptance, right? Self-compassion is more like accepting that I might have this limitation now, but wanting to work on it. According to the research that's been done, self-compassion does not limit hard work. It does not make people lose their edge. In fact, quite the opposite. People who practice self-compassion tend to work harder and achieve more than people who do not. So let's get to that. Let's put a pin in that. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about what self-compassion is. Self-compassion has 3 domains and 2 different types, let's say. The 3 domains, very simply, the first is self-judgment versus self-kindness. So measured on a scale of how judgmental we are of ourselves versus how much we treat ourselves with kindness. The second scale is common humanity versus isolation. And common humanity is an interesting one to me because common humanity measures the extent to which I treat myself like a regular human being, right? If any other human being in my life or in my workspace or in my relationship, my family, made a mistake or messed something up or wasn't good at something, I don't know that I'd be overly judgmental and overly critical and harsh, right? I might say to them, it's okay, it's all right, you tried and that didn't go well. Let's think about how to work on that and how to, right? But when it comes to myself, I'll tell myself I'm stupid, I'm an idiot, I'm weak, I'm so awful, right? And so I don't, people who have a tendency to do that, myself included, are not practicing common humanity. And then the last domain is mindfulness versus over-identification. So mindfulness has to do with being present in the moment, not thinking about the past or the future, but just being here in the moment and attending to what's in the moment. And part of that is recognizing our thoughts. And people who get good with a mindfulness practice, people who work on it for a while, will learn that they are not their thoughts, that your thoughts are not your identity. There are things that happen inside your mind, but they are not who you are. And that's what over-identification is the idea that if you think hurtful or critical or ugly things, that defines you. Over-identification with your thoughts. So, to use the same example, if I do something wrong and I have the thought of, oh, I'm so stupid, right? Okay, well, I didn't practice common humanity because that is not how I would treat other people in my life. And I did practice harsh self-judgment. I was not kind to myself. But if I practice mindfulness, if I just get that one out of the 3 domains, then I might say to myself, oh, how funny, I just thought to myself that I'm stupid. But I'm not stupid, I may not be a genius, but I'm not stupid. I have at least an average IQ. I've I've managed to achieve a master's degree and a PhD. I've managed to work my way to be a field grade officer in the military. I've worked as a psychologist. I have a personal training certification. Now, none of those makes me brilliant, but I have to have at least reasonable intelligence. I can't be stupid and do all of those things. And so that's a more mindful approach. Anyhow, that's an example. So those are the three aspects of self-compassion. That's mindfulness versus over-identification, common humanity versus isolation, and self-kindness versus self-judgment. The two types of self-compassion are fierce self-compassion and passive self-compassion. Passive self-compassion is more internal. So passive self-compassion is what I just described. So if I immediately think, oh my God, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I made that mistake. But then my mindful brain kicks in and says, hey, wait a second, you just had this thought that you're stupid, but that doesn't mean you're stupid. And let's treat ourselves with common humanity, the way we would treat other people. And let's recognize that everyone makes a mistake once in a while. We may not like it, you may not be happy about it, but it's okay, right? That's an internal process. And that's the passive side of self-compassion. Fierce self-compassion is way more active and dynamic. So just by way of an example. So for an example, let's say I've had a very, very busy week and maybe a couple of things have come up unexpectedly during my week. Maybe, my kids have some extra responsibilities after school and I have to bring them some places, and a couple of things at work went haywire and I needed some extra attention for those. And maybe my partner and I had a disagreement, so I have to attend to our relationship a little bit. And as it's getting toward the end of the week, I'm feeling exhausted. I'm feeling wrecked. And maybe I just want to stay home this weekend and relax and go down in the basement and play some music, play some bass or some guitar. Or maybe I want to go out into the mountains and hike and just be around nature, but not around people. Maybe I want some quiet. And then I have a bunch of friends who I haven't seen in a while who invite me out for the weekend. And I might feel a little bit of guilt saying no to them because I haven't seen them in a while. Or maybe I've said no the last 2 or 3 times they invited me. And I'm worried about, abusing the relationship. But fierce self-compassion allows me to set the boundary and say, I would love to see you guys. I miss you. I'm sorry that I haven't been around. This week has been absolutely brutal. I'm gonna set a boundary for this weekend and just take time for myself, try to decompress a little bit. Why don't we plan something for the weekend after? Right? That's an example of fierce self-compassion. It's actively taking care of myself. Telling myself all the niceties in the world isn't going to help if I then don't act in ways that are consistent with that. So let's get back to the study that I referenced before about that sort of debunks the idea that people who practice self-compassion are complacent or lazy or just allow their shortcomings to exist. There have been several studies demonstrating that this is not the case. However, the one that sticks with me the most was a study of college students. I think it was at Stanford University. Either way, it was at a very good school where folks have to be pretty bright to get admitted there. And they took students from this university and gave them a vocabulary test that was impossible to pass. It was specifically designed for them to fail. And so what they did was they all took the test and they failed. And they split them into groups. And there was a group that was coached in self-compassion, taught how to say things like, well, everyone fails a test from time to time, and I must be smart if I got into this school, so I'm clearly not dumb, but maybe I didn't prepare for that exam correctly, or maybe I could have spent more time on it, things like that. The other group was given no coaching at all. It is unethical. You're not allowed to coach a group to be cruel to themselves. But the assumption was that with no coaching at all, the group would tend to be more self-critical. Those individuals would probably say, man, I'm so dumb, I can't believe I failed that test. And that was an assumption made that was their likelihood. And then I think there was a third group that was given a pamphlet on study interventions or something of the sort. All three groups were told that they could retake the test again in, a few weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. And they measured how much time each group spent studying and how the performance was on the retest. And overwhelmingly, the group that was coached on self-compassion studied way harder for the retest, did way more preparation, and exponentially improved in their scores, especially over the group that was self-critical. So the people who think they have to be tough on themselves to keep their edge are mistaken. It's actually the people who learn to be more self-compassionate that work harder and improve along the way. So why is this? Well, I don't know for sure. That study was not causal. It was correlational, right? The groups that practiced self-compassion did better, but they didn't exactly demonstrate why. I can tell you why I think it is. If you look at those three domains again, self-kindness versus self-judgment, common humanity versus isolation, and mindfulness versus over-identification. All of the sort of negative aspects of each of those continua, so there's self-judgment, isolation, and over-identification. All three of those things tend to lead toward a sense of shame. Shame is the idea not so much that I did something wrong, but that I am bad, that I am wrong, right? If I did something wrong and I'm still a decent person, I can apologize, I can make amends, I can try to fix it and improve it. But if I did something wrong because I'm an idiot or because I'm bad, because my character is flawed, there's nothing I can do about that. And that's a sense of shame. And that leads into things like a fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset. And it comes up in all kinds of other areas of our lives and our relationships and our ability to be good employees, to work, to even how we save money and things of that sort. And so the idea is that the group that failed the test and was very critical, oh, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I failed that test. When they would go back to study, it would bring up a sense of shame. It would remind them of how stupid they are, of how bad they are for having failed this test. And so they were averse to it. And because they were averse to it, they spent less time studying. And because they spent less time studying, they did worse on the retest. Whereas the group that practiced self-compassion didn't have that sense of shame. They were not ashamed by having failed the test. Maybe they felt a little bad about it, but it wasn't a scar on their character, right? They said things like, well, I know I'm smart. I got into the school. I just didn't prepare well for this test. Okay. Well, when they went to prepare for the retest, they were much more willing to really roll up their sleeves and engage because that sense of shame wasn't there. And because their character is somebody who wants to do well and can fix the problem, like in a growth mindset. And because of that, they spent more time preparing and as a result did much, much better on the exam. So my challenge to you is to find ways to practice self-compassion, both passively, internally, and fierce self-compassion. Set boundaries in your life and actively do things that will show compassion for yourself. Even things like meal prep is a form of fierce self-compassion. And then let me know how you make out. Let me know how things go. I'd love to be able to help you if you need help along with this, but if you just take to it and find it's helpful, please let me know. If it's not helpful, let me know. Maybe we can troubleshoot. But until next time, I am Dr. Jerry Sunshine Novak, the Biker Psychologist, saying time to biker up. Keep growing until you're thriving. Have a great week, everyone.